Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Tuesday, August 26th, 2025. All right, this episode of Anti-War News is sponsored by the Expat Money Online Summit, which returns this October. This is the third year in a row that they are sponsoring the show and that we are helping promote the event. And the Expat Money Summit is hosted by Mikkel Thorup, the host of the Expat Money Show, a friend of ours at antiwar.com. And this free online event is packed with real strategies that you can use right now, like acquiring second residencies and citizenships, legally mitigating taxes, purchasing international real estate, setting up offshore banking, and more. This year's summit is focused on Latin America, and for very good reason, with all of the changing dynamics down there, and that is where Mikkel is based as well. So over 3 jam-packed days from October 10th to the 12th, Mikkel is bringing together top-tier experts to help you build your offshore plan B quickly and effectively in the region. Head over to expatmoneysummit.com to reserve your free ticket today. And once again, I will be speaking on one of the exclusive VIP panels. So if you want to get a VIP ticket, listeners of this show can use the code ANTIWAR for 20% off a VIP ticket, which includes lifetime replays, exclusive panels, and more. So go to expatmoneysummit.com and don't forget to use that code ANTIWAR if you want a VIP ticket for 20% off. Once again, expatmoneysummit.com. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. IDF double tap strike on hospital kills journalists. So the big news from Monday, this horrific attack on the Nasser hospital in southern Gaza in Khan Yunis. So the Israeli military massacred 20 Palestinians, including 5 journalists, in an attack on Gaza's Nasser hospital that involved a double tap strike on rescue workers. According to the AP, the initial strike at 10:10 a.m. Gaza time hit the 4th floor of the hospital, which has surgical operating rooms and doctors' residences, killing at least 2 people. Once rescue workers and journalists arrived at the scene, a second strike hit, killing 18 more people. And this double tap attack was caught on video. And this was a live broadcast on an Arab news broadcast, and you can see the rescue workers and then they get hit, and you could hear the reporter, from the live stream responding to the strike. And if you look closely, again, you have the rescue workers in the orange vests, and the people to the right of them have, at least 2 of them, if you zoom in, have cameras. And so I put in a tweet in the story here from Yuval Abraham, who's an Israeli reporter for 972 magazine, because he had a investigation last month that was published in 972 that said the IDF has adopted using double tap strikes as a standard procedure in Gaza. And double tap means you launch a strike on a building, and then when people show up to help people who are under the rubble or whatever the situation is, then you strike again. So that's the double tap. And that's what we actually saw on video here. So according to Reuters, the initial strike killed one of its contractors, a cameraman named Hussam al-Masri, who was killed near a live broadcasting position operated by Reuters on the upper floor of the hospital. Antiwar.com, we have a photo account with Reuters, and we have used several photos taken by al-Masri in previous news stories. I linked to the most recent one. I knew I recognized the name, and I put it in. I searched our photos, and I found at least 3 of his that we have published. And this is who the IDF is murdering in Gaza, the journalists that bring us things like this. This picture from July 15th is of a Palestinian mother looking after her 5-month-old daughter who is suffering from severe malnutrition. So this is what Reuters says. Again, listen to this is exactly the language that they used. Their contractor, their cameraman, was killed near a live broadcasting position operated by Reuters on the upper floor of the Nasser hospital. So the initial statement from the Israeli military, according to Haaretz and other Israeli media, was that they claimed they said the initial strike targeted a camera, and they claimed that it was a Hamas camera that was being used to observe IDF forces. They say that a tank shell struck the area, then another one was fired to make sure the camera was destroyed. I mean, completely absurd to say, oh, we hit a Hamas camera. And the journalists in the area at all the hospitals, this is why when Anas al-Sharif was targeted, assassinated by the IDF, he was in a tent outside, I believe, the Al-Shifa hospital in northern Gaza, in Gaza City, because they've been sheltering at journalists work at hospitals because they're able to get Wi-Fi signal. Apparently this was in a stairwell. That's where they tend to gather. And the official statement from the military was, oh yeah, we targeted the camera. And then we just wanted to make sure that it was destroyed. So we hit it again with another tank shell. And then Netanyahu later claimed that the double tap strike was a tragic mishap, as if, hitting, the same spot twice like that could possibly be an accident. And then there was a report from Israel's Channel 14 that cited Israeli soldiers who said the attack was approved and coordinated with the senior command. So I think it's very clear this was a deliberate double tap airstrike on journalists and rescue workers at a hospital. Just war crime on top of war crime on top of war crime. So I want to name the other 4 journalists who were killed in the attack. One of them was Mariam Abu Daga, who freelanced for the Associated Press and other outlets. Mohammed Salama, who worked for Middle East Eye and Al Jazeera. Moaz Abu Taha, a freelance journalist who worked with several news outlets. And Ahmed Abu Aziz, another freelancer who also contributed to Middle East Eye. So Daga, she recently co-authored a report for the Associated Press that highlighted the plight of malnourished children in Gaza. And this is something we ran at antiwar.com and that I went over on this show. It was published on August 14th, so not that long ago. So these are the journalists who were killed, who are bringing light, shedding light on the starvation campaign against the innocent civilians and children of Gaza. The number, according to the Palestinian Journalists Syndicate of journalists who have been killed by Israel in Gaza, has climbed to 244. Just a huge number. One thing, if you go to the lower part of our page, the Gaza section, we have a bunch of stories about the journalists who were killed, including photos. This is again by Mariam Daga, who did. I mean, some of these photos are some of the most powerful photos I've seen come out of Gaza are from her, including one here of a 5-year-old boy who starved to death and was placed on these bricks during his funeral. And he looks, I just remember thinking, he looks like he's like 3. And that's common with all the children you see in Gaza. They look like they're so much younger than they are because of the malnutrition and disease and everything that they're going through. All right, so the next one here, Israeli attacks and starvation kill 69 in Gaza over 24 hours. So Gaza's health ministry said on Monday that Israeli attacks killed at least 58 Palestinians and wounded 308 over the previous 24-hour period as U.S.-backed Israeli attacks continue across the Strip. So 58 violent deaths, and the health ministry said that hospitals recorded 11 Palestinians who starved to death due to the Israeli blockade. They said that it brought the total number of victims of famine and malnutrition to 300. And that's just what is being recorded by the hospitals. The Israeli military has kept up its relentless attacks after the UN-backed Integrated Food Security Phase classification confirmed that famine is taking place in Gaza City and nearby towns. And the IPC is calling for an immediate ceasefire, and that's what all the aid groups and the UN are calling for to address this humanitarian catastrophe. But of course, Israel's planning a major escalation, and Trump is sending every signal that he's willing to support it. And this picture here is from Reuters, one of their photographers in Gaza, and it's a picture of a man holding the body of a very young child who apparently was killed by Israeli fire. It's not exactly clear how this boy was killed, but very young. Israeli attacks on Monday included the double tap strike, so I mentioned that in here, of course. And so another aspect of this that I mentioned in this story is, what is the IDF doing right now? They're trying to get Palestinians in Gaza City to go to the south, or at least that's what they say they're trying to do. And at the same time, they bombed the main hospital in the south like this, with this double tap airstrike. And they've continued to bomb tents in Khan Yunis and so many areas of southern Gaza when they're telling the Palestinians in Gaza City to flee to the south. And we have not seen a major evacuation. We've seen, according to the report, several thousand have left Gaza City. But we're not seeing like a mass hundreds of thousands or millions of people making the trek south for multiple reasons. One is many of them are probably just too weak to go to make another displacement. And then, others are just refuse to leave. They know that their city's going to be completely destroyed. If they leave, they'll never be able to go back. And then the other is that they think they're probably going to be killed in southern Gaza anyway. And they don't trust the roads. I mean, with all the aid massacres happening, there's a lot of reason not to go ahead with the evacuation, even though you're aware that you could be killed, starved, or bombed to death by the IDF if you stay. And the Israeli killing of aid seekers has continued. The health ministry said that it recorded the killing of 28 aid seekers over the past 24 hours. All right, so the next one here, Eyewitness says American contractors at GHF sites fired at Palestinians. So this article is from CBS News. This was published last week, but I wanted to make sure we ran it because I think it's important here. So since the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the GHF, first began operating nearly 3 months ago, the UN says hundreds of Palestinians have been shot and killed by the IDF and foreign military contractors at or near its aid sites. CBS spoke to a new eyewitness who said that it's not just the IDF firing at Palestinians, but also personnel hired through American subcontractors to secure GHF sites. The witness, who we will refer to as Mike, asked CBS News to conceal his identity because he fears reprisal. When Mike was hired by an American logistics company to drive aid trucks in Israel, he said he had no idea he'd be working with the GHF inside Gaza. Just an important point here. This is another whistleblower, not Tony Aguilar, the Green Beret. So the U.S. and Israeli-backed GHF was established to replace the UN. We all know this background. So Mike secretly recorded videos and shared them with CBS News. You can hear gunfire in the videos, which Mike says was fired at Palestinians seeking aid. He said, quote, "It took me 2 or 3 days to realize that they were actually shooting at people. They weren't shooting at combatants." So when asked whether he thought they were warning shots, he said no, it was indiscriminate. And one of the really horrific thing, what he said was the worst thing that he saw. At one point the worst thing he experienced, he said that he was tasked by the security contractors with cleaning up human and animal remains adjacent to one site while on the job due to the foul smell. So if you watch the video, he actually says he was told to clean up these animal remains and was not told that some of them are human remains. I mean, this is stuff out of that you hear out of the Holocaust, these types of stories, just gunning people down and just leaving them to die and their bodies to rot, unarmed civilians who are trying to get food. I mean, this is just, it's just so horrific. And it's another account from someone who's speaking out about what they saw at these GHF sites. All right, so the next one here, Americans are now more sympathetic to Palestinians. So a new University of Maryland critical issues poll has found that Americans are more sympathetic to Palestinians than Israelis, a historic shift in U.S. public opinion that comes as the U.S. government continues to support Israel's genocidal war against the Palestinians of the Gaza Strip. So the poll found that 28% of respondents sympathized more with the Palestinians and 22% said they sympathized more with the Israelis, while 26% said that they sympathized with both sides equally, 12% said neither, and 13% said that they didn't know. So they had a few options here. And sympathy for Palestinians is stronger among Americans ages 18 to 34, with 37% of them saying they sympathize more with the Palestinians and just 11% sympathizing more with the Israelis. The results are divided by political party. Obviously, this is expected, with Republicans much more sympathetic toward the Israelis. 46% of Republicans picked the Israelis and 7% more sympathetic toward the Palestinians. Sympathy for Palestinians is stronger among younger Republicans. 12% of the younger Republicans said they're more sympathetic toward Palestinians. 24% chose Israelis. So still overall, the Republicans have a more sympathetic view of the Israelis, but public opinion is really shifting here, and it's no surprise. And they said that this organization said, the University of Maryland polling group here said that their results follow trends from other polling organizations, but they were the first ones to find more U.S. sympathy for Palestinians than Israel in recent years. And this poll was conducted from July 29th to August 7th, and this is around the time we started to see major U.S. media outlets covering the Israeli-imposed starvation. So the poll found that 40% of Americans believe that Trump's policy toward the Israeli-Palestinian issue is too pro-Israel, while only 3% said that he was too pro-Palestinian, and 27% said that it's about right. The poll also found that 41% of Americans believe that Israel's actions in Gaza either constitute genocide, 22% said that, or are akin to genocide, 19% said that. Just 22% of respondents said that Israel's actions were justified under the country's so-called right to self-defense. And the majority of respondents, I thought this was interesting, acknowledged the U.S. government's responsibility for Israel's military operations. 61% agreed that U.S. military, economic, and diplomatic support for Israel enables Israeli actions in Gaza. And I think that's important that a lot of Americans understand how much support the U.S. provides Israel. All right, so the next one here, Palestinian boys allege sexual assault, torture by Israeli jailers. This article is from Brett Wilkins. So Palestinian teenagers kidnapped and imprisoned by Israeli occupation forces during the genocidal war on Gaza accuse their jailers of torturing and sexually assaulting them in a recent report published Saturday by the Australia Broadcasting Corporation. A 16-year-old boy who was abducted on June 29th told ABC, quote, "They took me from the aid distribution site and transferred me to a hospital in Rafah where I was interrogated for an hour. They stripped me and conducted a body search. Then they loaded me into a jeep and transported me to a prison in Israel. During the interrogations, they tortured us, handcuffing us, beating us with sticks, and using electric shocks. They did countless things to break us. I was tortured for a week until I lost all sense of time and awareness. They put me in 1 square meter cell where I spent the entire week. I never saw daylight, never stepped outside. They only came to deliver food. They asked if I knew anyone from Hamas and whether I had crossed on October 7th. They kept pressing me about who I knew and who I had seen. I told them I was just walking down the street. I didn't know anything. They would beat me. Each person that talked to me would beat me. I was handcuffed, blindfolded, and they put electricity in my legs," end quote. Mahmoud, who was 17 years old, said that his Israeli abductors began hurling insults, cursing at them. He said, quote, "They stripped us of our clothes and took us to Kerem Shalom, completely naked with nothing. There the beatings and torture began. The Israeli women soldiers beat us. They stripped us and played here and there." And apparently when he said that, he was indicating to his genitals. "They beat us with sticks, got on us while we were lying on the ground. We were handcuffed like that and naked," end quote. And we've seen lots of stories like this about torture and sexual abuse of Palestinians in Israeli prisons. Of course, there was the rebellion over Israeli soldiers getting arrested for sexually assaulting a Palestinian prisoner in the Seti. I believe that was in the Seti time in prison, which has become notorious. So just horrific conditions in these prisons. And these are kids, like people that can just get scooped up for any reason by the IDF. Or, again, I should change that language. They can get scooped up for no reason. All right, so the next one here, Syria slams latest Israeli incursion. So this one's from Jason Ditz. So the ongoing security talks between Israel and Syria are taking another blow with the news that Israeli ground troops invaded Syrian territory near the village of Beit Jin, overlooking the Syria-Lebanon border. An estimated 60 IDF troops backed by military vehicles entered the area and reportedly captured 6 Syrian civilians. The IDF has yet to make a statement on the operation, but the Syrian Foreign Ministry condemned it, said that it's part of Israel's expansionist and partition plans. And this is the HTS, Al-Qaeda linked government of Syria. But they have been in these talks between, with Israeli officials that the U.S. is really pushing for. But I mean, I would be very surprised if there's any kind of security deal, which is what the U.S. is seeking, announced anytime soon. And then the next one here, Syria's de facto president to address the UN General Assembly. So Ahmed al-Shara, the former al-Qaeda leader who is now Syria's de facto president, is expected to travel to New York City in September to address the UN General Assembly, and this was reported by Reuters. According to the Cradle, Shara will become the first Syrian president to address the General Assembly since 1967, and he will participate in the General Assembly Week, which is scheduled to begin on September 22nd. The Jerusalem Post reported that the U.S. is hoping to have a security deal between Israel and Shara's government to announce by the time of the General Assembly. I just put the background here about Shara, formerly known as Abu Muhammad al-Jilani. He got his start with al-Qaeda after the U.S. invaded Iraq. He went to Iraq to fight U.S. troops. He was arrested and held in prison from 2006 to 2011. Then he was released. He went over to Syria, and there he started the al-Nusra Front, which was Syria's al-Qaeda affiliate. In 2016, he rebranded and said he was cutting ties with al-Qaeda, but he put out a statement thanking al-Qaeda for understanding the need to sever ties. And al-Qaeda actually put out a statement too, telling him, good luck with your new endeavors. We understand why you have to do this. Basically, that's not obviously exactly what they said, but it was essentially like that. It was clear his whole thing was a rebranding campaign to get support, international support, and he's certainly gotten it. So then in 2017, he formed Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, and they were held up in Idlib for a while. And then, of course, in 2024, with support from Turkey, the U.S., and Israel, they went on the march against Assad, and they drove him out very quickly, and they took power. And since he came into power, the new Trump administration especially, has really embraced Shara, and Trump was very happy when he met him. They lifted sanctions on Syria, which I still believe is good, overall good, because there's a lot of civilians in Syria, and that's who the sanctions always harm. But the U.S. also removed, you really just see the hypocrisy. A literal al-Qaeda group, they removed HTS from the list of designated terrorist groups, despite what we've seen in Syria, these massacres of civilians, Alawite, Druze civilians go on, and nobody seems to care. And now he's going to come to New York City. So it's just a lot of hypocrisy, of course, in the U.S. foreign policy. All right, so the next one here, U.S. launches multiple airstrikes in Somalia. So U.S. Africa Command said in a press release on Monday that its forces had launched multiple airstrikes as part of a 2-week operation against the ISIS affiliate in Somalia's northeastern Puntland region that concluded on August 23rd. The command said, quote, operations consisted of targeted strikes against ISIS leadership safe havens in the Golis Mountains, end quote. And that was about all the details that they shared. They also said that it was in coordination with the federal government, but the U.S.-backed federal government does not control Puntland. The U.S. backs local forces there, where they've been fighting this ISIS affiliate, which is an offshoot of al-Shabaab, which goes to show how successful the U.S. military intervention has been in Somalia. Now they not only have al-Shabaab to fight, but now they have another group to fight in the northeast. So the Puntland Counterterrorism Operations X account, and this is the security forces that the U.S. backs, they announced kind of a series of operations against ISIS fighters over the past week or so, claiming that they're capturing caves that the militants were hiding out in. They said on August 24th that there's ongoing airstrikes and raids against them. So it sounds like these operations are continuing, that the U.S. is involved in. And also on Monday, AFRICOM announced its forces launched an airstrike against al-Shabaab in southern Somalia on August 22nd, as the U.S. has been providing the federal government with heavy air power in recent battles. AFRICOM did not say how many airstrikes it launched during the 2-week campaign against ISIS. So let's go with the bare minimum for my count of U.S. airstrikes in Somalia. I'm going to go for the bare minimum for the ISIS 2 weeks. So we're going to put the bare minimum. Again, they said they launched multiple airstrikes, so we're going to count that as 2 airstrikes, and then the new one against al-Shabaab. So that's a total of 3 new U.S. airstrikes in Somalia. That brings the total for the year to 61. So that means they're 2 away from breaking the annual record of 63, which Trump set back in 2019. Now, there's a good chance that they already broke it with this multiple airstrikes. So I asked AFRICOM if they could tell me how many airstrikes they launched in those 2 weeks and what the total is. And I also asked them to confirm that 63 is the record. They have been getting back to me, AFRICOM, so I'm expecting to see an email from them tomorrow. I think one reason why is because there's no other journalists asking them these questions. They're probably eager to answer some questions, even though they don't give me real information. It's just numbers. Obviously, they're not sharing any details. I always ask for more details about strikes, and sometimes they email me and say, "Oh, we'll get back to you as soon as we can." And I don't get anything, obviously, but this is just kind of absurd that the U.S. is bombing, involved in these heavy battles in Somalia, and it's just getting nothing in the U.S. media. All right, so the next one here, Zelensky wants $1 billion per month for U.S. weapons. So Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Monday that he wants $1 billion per month from NATO countries to purchase U.S. weapons. Comments that come as a peace deal seems increasingly unlikely following the summit between Trump and Putin. NATO recently announced a new scheme under which member states commit to spending on U.S. weapons to ship to Ukraine, known as the Prioritized Ukraine Requirements List Initiative, or the PEARL Initiative. So far, about $2 billion has been committed to the effort in pledges from the Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Germany, and Canada. So 6 NATO countries have pledged $2 billion so far. Zelensky said, quote, "Our goal is to fill this program with no less than $1 billion every month. We also discussed our domestic drone production and joint opportunities with partners. Investments now can help not only physically, but also force Russia to end the war," end quote. So he said this while the Prime Minister of Norway, Jonas Gahr Store, was visiting Ukraine, and Store pledged that Norway would provide Ukraine with $8.4 billion in aid for 2026, which is a big number. And that's the same amount that they provided this year. He said that will go toward military and civilian support. So it's not just military aid, that $8.4 billion. They also discussed the idea of security guarantees, which I think is pretty clear. That's going to be what kills the peace effort, if anything, is this insistence from Ukraine and the Europeans that they need NATO-style Article 5 guarantees and that involve a Western troop deployment to Ukraine. They're still pushing this, even though Russia has made clear it's unacceptable and it's just a non-starter for negotiations. It seems like Trump, has signaled that he's on board with the idea of the troop deployment. So, things aren't looking good when it comes to the prospect for peace. All right, so the next one here, Israel offers to support Hezbollah disarmament. This one is from Jason Ditz. So apparently Netanyahu says that Israel is ready to support Lebanon in their disarmament of Hezbollah, which the government has announced to do amid U.S. demands to monopolize arms under state control. And apparently Netanyahu said that he will consider a phased reduction of Israeli ground troops in Lebanon. I'm not even saying that he'll withdraw, which is kind of amazing. He's saying that there'll be a reduction of Israeli troops in southern Lebanon, but he's not saying that they'll withdraw and give up those outposts that they have in southern Lebanon. And what Israel probably wants the Lebanese government to go to war with Hezbollah to try to disarm them. And I think that's a big part of what is behind this push, U.S. push to demand the Hezbollah disarmament. It could really create chaos internally in Lebanon, which Israel would obviously take advantage of. All right, so the next one here, Trump wants to bring back the Department of War. So this is an idea that Trump has that I am very supportive of. So in a meeting with South Korea's president, Donald Trump suggested renaming the Department of Defense to the Department of War. This article is by Kyle Anzalone, I should have said. So this is what Trump said. He said, quote, "Pete Hegseth has been incredible with the, as I call it, the Department of War. We call it the Department of Defense, but between us, I think we're going to change the name. I have a feeling we're going to be changing. Everybody likes that. We have an unbelievable history of victory when it was Department of War," end quote. And he has referred to Hegseth as the Secretary of War. And this is something that was changed after World War II, when this, national security state that was created during World War II decided that it was going to stick around. They wanted to rebrand a little bit, so they called themselves the Department of Defense. And it's very Orwellian, obviously. When the U.S. is expanded across the globe as if all these wars are defense somehow. So I think calling it what it is a good move. I think I am supportive of this. I believe Congress would need to approve it. So we'll see if that happens. All right, so the next one here, the last story, Trump hopes to meet with North Korean leader. So this one is another one from Kyle, published at the Libertarian Institute. So President Trump, so one thing that happened on Monday, I mentioned briefly in the last story, he met with South Korea's president, Lee Jae-myung, the new South Korean president, in Washington. And Trump said that he wants to meet with Kim Jong-un again, which he did during his first administration. And essentially North Korea's position, which Kyle has been covering, is that they've ruled out talks with South Korea. They've suggested that they could be open to talks with the U.S. if the U.S. drops the demand that North Korea denuclearize. And one approach that was explored during the first Trump administration was, instead of demanding denuclearization, maybe pursue a freeze of in the buildup of nuclear weapons and to foster dialogue. So this is what Trump said. He said, quote, "I have a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un, North Korea. In fact, someday I'll see him. I look forward to seeing him. He was very good with me. We had 2 meetings. We had 2 summits. We got along great. I know him better than you do. I know him better than anybody, almost other than his sister," end quote. So we'll see if there's some diplomacy there, to ease tensions, because tensions are very high right now over there between the North and the South. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Ron Paul. President Trump should return to an America First foreign policy. One from Jack F. Matlock Jr., Russiagate and the Anchorage meeting. One from Norman Solomon. DNC leaders are pretending that U.S. weapons don't enable the slaughter in Gaza. One from Joseph Solis Mullen. Creative Chaos, the CIA's covert war to topple the Syrian government. So Joseph wrote this at the Mises Institute, but this is a book that I need to get a copy of, by William Van Wagenen. It's published. He writes for the Cradle, but it was published at the Libertarian Institute. It's called Creative Chaos: Inside the CIA's Covert War to Topple the Syrian Government. I got to get, like I said, I got to read it, but very good review here. I would recommend. I haven't read it yet, but I'm sure it's great considering it's published by Scott. And then our spotlight's from Bernard at Moon of Alabama. Zelensky rejects giving land as fascists promise to kill him. So I wanted to highlight this because, Zelensky gave a speech on Sunday saying that they're never going to be forced into a compromise. We're never going to give away any land, never going to cede anything to Russia. And Bernard here found that this came just 2 days after the former leader of the fascist right sector in Odessa, Serhiy Sternenko, threatened Zelensky, said something that sounded like a threat on Zelensky's life. I'll read you the quote. And this was published in the London Times. He said, quote, "If President Zelensky were to give any unconquered land away, he would be a corpse, politically and then for real. It would be a bomb under our sovereignty. People would never accept it," end quote. So Zelensky could be facing real threats from the far right in Ukraine. So that's everything. Go check out our blog. And then if you go down, we have a lot of stuff in the lower parts of the page about all different conflicts happening and a lot of stuff from Gaza. So always stuff to read, even if you watch or listen to this show. The majority of the people who consume this show still listen to the podcast. So that's why at the end, I always say, thanks for listening. Maybe if the YouTube and Rumble views exceed the daily downloads, I'll start saying thanks for watching, but we will see. But anyway, that is it for me for today. If you're interested in sponsoring the show, if you have any kind of business that you want to promote, you could email me, davedecamp@protonmail.com. You could always just support us by sharing the show. Tell your friends about antiwar.com. Follow us on social media. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.